Today's video is on something that I get asked to do a lot of during workshops that I run for Nature's Light, as well as for photographers in the Durban area where I live. And that is cleaning your camera sensor. Now, before I even get into this, I know I'm going to get blowback from armchair critics on how to both clean your sensor as well as whether you should even do it in the first place. The first argument that I hear, and this is even from companies near where I live, who say, never, ever, ever touch your sensor. Don't even consider cleaning it because you might potentially irreparably damage it. And that is true. So this does come with a slight disclaimer that you do so under your own risk. If you make a mistake, it is not my fault. It is not the fault of the manufacturer. It is not the fault of the company that you have bought the cleaning products from. However, if you are stuck photographing in the Namibian desert and you've got sand on your sensor or dust on your sensor, you're going to have to get rid of it. You can't wait to come back from Kolmanskorp to wherever you happen to live to be able to get your sensor cleaned. The same is true of any kind of expedition photography where you are going to be away from any service center where somebody can potentially clean the sensor for you. Now, the reason why it is advisable to use companies to clean your sensor is because they're often insured. So it means that if something happens to your sensor under their watch, they'll get it replaced or they'll repair it, or at least they're supposed to. It's not always the case, unfortunately. But as I said, sometimes you don't have a choice and you are stuck in the middle of who knows where and you've got crud on your sensor and you've got to get rid of it. So knowing how to clean your sensor is, I think, imperative for any serious photographer. Now, I've got in front of me over here two cameras. I've got a D850, so a DSLR, and a Z7, a mirrorless camera. And I'm going to look at how we can clean them using something to be able to get rid of some of the dust and the muck that potentially is going to land on your sensor. Not potentially, is going to land on your sensor at some point. So let me get these out of the way for the time being. To be able to check your sensor to see whether there is any dust, it's actually relatively easy. All you need to do if you are shooting with a DSLR is to set your aperture to its smallest aperture, so something like f22 or f32 if you have one of those lenses that goes as small as that. And then you are going to go to either a white wall and you set your shutter speed to a long shutter speed, and basically you move your camera up and down as much as possible in front of that wall. Any kind of spot that you see inside your photograph is going to be a dust spot. Another similar way that you can do this is by taking a mirrorless camera, dropping down to your smallest aperture, getting it relatively underexposed so you can see any dirt, and then going outside and pointing it up at the sky or again at a white wall. And you should be able to actually see the little dots inside your viewfinder simply because you are actually looking through your sensor with a mirrorless camera. Any dots that you see inside a DSLR camera through the viewfinder are not going to affect your image because those dust mites and bits of lint are on your optical viewfinder. They are not affecting your image. So if you see bits of crud in your viewfinder, don't worry, it's not affecting your photograph. It's only when you're using a mirrorless camera that you see the crud that you know it's affecting your photograph because you are looking through the sensor. With a DSLR, you are looking through the optical viewfinder and the mirror. If they've got dirt on them, it's not going to affect your image. First off, the tools that you're going to need. Everybody needs one of these. This is just a blower bulb. This is the Nisi blower bulb, which I received along with one of my V7 kits ages ago. You can also buy these separately from various manufacturers. I like the Nisi one. In the past, it used to be the Giotto's Rocket that everybody swore by, but I really like the Nisi one. And again, I will put links to various products in the comments below, so you can take a look at some of the stuff and where it is available. The Nisi blower, obviously, you can get from Nature's Light or from Landscape Gear in South Africa. Okay, so first off, there's the blower. And this is an absolutely essential piece of kit because even at the most basic level, you can get rid of quite a lot of the dust from your sensor simply by going into the lockup mode on your camera, opening up the sensor and blowing it off. Okay, so that's the first tool that you're absolutely going to need. The second tool, which I find relatively user-friendly and accessible, is the eyelead sensor gel stick. This is a gel-like substance at the end of a wand. Now, the basic idea is that you use these little sticky swipes to clean the gel itself, and then you can very gently press this down onto your sensor and you can remove quite large pieces of crud. It is a fairly simple and easy way to be able to get rid of large pieces of dust and lint, but it does come with a couple of caveats, and you've got to be very careful using one of these. For a start, you don't swipe because the gel itself can adhere to the sensor and you can end up with a bit of an issue having gel that you've now got to get off of your sensor itself. The other problem is that it doesn't necessarily get rid of some of the more sticky pollen that potentially lands on the sensor and glues itself to the glass of the sensor. Then, if you get the wrong type, and I highly recommend only sticking with the eyelead in this particular case, if you get the wrong type, there have been some horror stories of people pressing down maybe a little too hard, and then as they release, pulling the anti-alias filter off of the sensor itself. So be aware that this particular little wand comes with some downsides. I'm going to do a brief demonstration of this in a moment. Okay. The next set of tools I keep in a bag which I've had for years from the original kind of sensor swipe company. I think it was Copperhill or Sensor Swipe itself. At any rate, I've now filled it with various other brands bits inside there, so it doesn't matter what you use necessarily as long as they are reputable. Okay, so the first and most important part of this is going to be the sensor swipe itself. Now, this brand that I've got in front of you over here is actually a eyelead as well, so the same company that does the sensor gel stick. Disappointingly, they keep their sensor swipes inside a pack of 3 inside a sealed bag. I prefer the versions that come individually inside a hermetically sealed bag, so it means that there is no crud on the sensor swipe itself. They're all built in more or less the same way. It's basically a plastic shovel with a broad edge at the end that is slightly flexible and has a very sharp edge to it. Around that shovel is a lint-free soft cloth that is scratch resistant as well, so that you can actually apply a fluid to it and then clean the sensor almost like a windscreen blade on your car. The full frame models have a 24mm across edge, and the APS-C frame models are 18mm across, so you do need to remember to buy the correct size for your camera. Although in a pinch, you can actually use a full frame sensor cleaner on an APS-C camera, but you're going to swipe differently, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. The brands that I have used in the past are obviously eyelead, as you can see over here, but you can also buy the cheaper JJCs, which work absolutely fine. I've never had any issue with them. They are relatively affordable, and I've actually found that they're one of the nicer ones to use personally. Then you can also get in South Africa and around the world K&F Concept, and it comes in a nice box because it comes included with the fluid. So these are the K&F Concept sensor swipes. Again, they come individually packaged, which is useful. I like individually packaged swipes because it means that they stay clean before you use them. But the kit also comes, and this is important, along with a bottle of fluid. Now, the fluid itself is a special sensor cleaning fluid that is usually alcohol based, so something like an isopropyl alcohol, but it also has other agents inside to ensure that there is no residue that is left behind once the actual fluid dries on your sensor. So it is important to buy the correct fluid when you are planning on cleaning your sensors. The other fluid that I have over here is Eclipse fluid, which is the good old stalwart, which has been used by everybody who's cleaned their own sensors for the last basically 20 years. It goes without saying that you don't want to swallow this stuff. If you do, get hold of a doctor. This stuff is not good for ingestion, so be aware that it is obviously dangerous to a certain extent. Those are the tools that you're going to need to be able to clean your sensor. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to go through the process and clean a sensor. So I'm going to put these aside. The other tool, of course, which I haven't mentioned yet, is a headlamp. It is a very good idea to use a headlamp when you're working on cleaning your sensors, because you get to see the detail inside and make sure that you are picking up all the dirt around it. So let's start with the DSLR over here, the D850. Now, with DSLRs, you've obviously got the problem that you have a mirror in the way, so you're going to have to get that up. So you need to make sure that you have a full battery in your camera whenever you clean your sensor. It's got to be full. The other problem with DSLRs is that it has a mirror box, so you're actually working in a fairly constrained area. The advantage of mirrorless cameras is that when you take the body cap off, your sensor is exposed and very close to the flange itself of the lens mount, so it makes it a lot easier to be able to work on these cameras. The downside to mirrorless cameras though is that most of their sensors have sensor stabilization, which means they've got these tiny little motors and gimbals based around the actual sensor itself. So if you press too hard, you can actually damage them. So you do need to be aware of that. The very first step before we actually want to clean any kind of sensor is just to get the dust off. So I'm going to use my Z7 in this situation, and one of the advantages of mirrorless cameras is of course you don't need to lock up. In the next little segment I'm going to talk about the locking up of the mirror for DSLRs, but for mirrorless cameras usually once you open it up you just see the sensor, so it's very easy. Just having the blower is going to make a difference. Now it's very important that when you use the blower, you have the camera facing down, because any dust that you are basically releasing is going to filter downwards. If you put your camera up like this, essentially what's going to happen is any dust that's in the air is going to land on your sensor. So you want to make sure that it's facing down when you are cleaning your sensor and getting the dust off. Okay, so that's nice and easy. That's step one. Use your blower. It's a great way to just be able to get rid of most of the dust, especially if it hasn't adhered to your sensor. Step two is using the eyelead sensor. And over here, I'm going to bring across my D850 to be able to look at that. So you're going to switch your camera on and make sure that you have a relatively full, if not full, battery inside your camera. Then you're going to go through to your menu, and depending on where it is based on your camera, you're going to go to mirror lockup. Once you're in mirror lockup, you're going to press that. The camera is then going to essentially shut off the sensor, but it is going to allow you to clean the sensor when you actually take the lens off. Once it's locked up, you're then going to open up your camera and you will be able to see your sensor. So what we're going to do in this case, because this is quite a dark frame inside here, is I'm going to use my eyelead sensor. So to start with, for the eyelead, we're going to open it up, and you never, ever touch the little gel stick at the end, because all it's going to do is going to pick up all of your grease from your fingers. So if you've got some lint-free gloves, it's a good idea to use those. But it's going to basically just pick up dirt. And that is again where we use one of these little sticky pieces. So what we're now going to do is get rid of the dirt that's on the sensor, on the gel stick already. And you can, I'm not sure if you can see it on the YouTube screen, but it's already picked off a bit of lint from there. And we're just going to get rid of that. And then we're going to attack the dust inside the camera. So you press down gently and you just lift it. And in this way, you can get rid of some of the more obvious pieces of dust. You will keep on using your piece of sticky tape just to remove any of that dust that you have captured, and you'll keep going. And in this way, you should be able to get rid of most of the big bits of gunk on your sensor itself. So you'll close up your lens, you'll switch the camera off, and the mirror will drop back down, and you theoretically have a cleaner sensor. It does get a bit more complicated when you're trying to clean a DSLR, obviously because of the mirror box, but it is not impossible, and once with a little bit of practice you should be absolutely fine. One of the nice things about the eyelead sensor is that it is very hard to scratch or damage your sensor if you're using the correct materials. So it's a great way for people who are starting in on using their cameras to be able to clean the sensor. Now for the terrifying one, the one that everybody gets very concerned about because they are worried that they're going to scratch their sensors, and there is that possibility. You do need to be aware that you have got to approach this with caution. You can potentially damage your sensor if you do this wrong, but having said that, with a little bit of practice, it's actually pretty easy and an important skill to have. So first step, again, if you're using a DSLR, you're going to make sure that you have a nice solid full battery, and you are going to put it into mirror lockup for cleaning. If you've got a Canon camera or a camera that has one of those new sensor shields or shutter shields, you just need to activate it so that it switches off so that you have access to your sensor to be able to clean it. Nice and simple. Before I open up my camera, I want to get my actual sensor stick ready for using. And I'm going to use a K&F sensor swab over here. Make sure that you are in a relatively clean room. You don't want to do this outside because obviously there's going to be dust and pollen and all sorts of stuff floating around. Similarly, you want to make sure that there is no fan blowing in the room. You want it fairly still inside the room that you're using because you don't want additional dust landing on your sensor. Make sure that you have got your fluid ready for use. So I'm going to have that open, and we're going to open up our sensor. And you'll notice with any of these little bags that the opening is always at the rear of the actual swipe so that you don't touch the swipe itself. Right, we take the cap off and then we are going to apply 3 or 4 drops, there we go, of fluid to the actual sensor itself or the swab itself. Then you are going to, with gentle pressure, apply it to the sensor, swipe across to the end, slide down to the bottom and then swipe back. And then once you're at the other end, you release, remove, pop your lens or your cap body back on the camera and switch off the camera if it was on, or just continue as is. And then you throw this away. You never, ever, ever use one of these again. The problem is you've now exposed this to air, you've exposed this to pollen, you've put some dirt on it. It is now contaminated. So you chuck it away. You're never going to use it again. Clean up and off we go. And that is it. That's how you clean your sensor. It's a relatively easy process and something that I highly recommend that everybody learn how to do. The kind of pressure that you're putting onto your sensor is essentially that you can feel it against your skin with a bit of pressure, but it is not deep. So practice on your hand so that you get a sense of the kind of pressure that you're wanting to apply to your sensor itself. To recap how much you actually want to clean, I'm going to pretend this little gaffer tape is my sensor. We're going to put this in over there. What you're doing is you are coming in at the top, you are sliding across to the other side, bringing down, and then sliding back to the edge and then lifting. All right? So in, slide across, down, slide back, and out. And that's it. That's how we clean our sensor. As I said at the beginning of this video, you clean your sensor at your own risk. I am not liable if you make a mistake, and neither are any of the manufacturers of the equipment that you buy to clean your sensor. But it is not necessarily rocket science, and it isn't dangerous. You can clean your sensor successfully, affordably, and most importantly, get it clean in the field, which is something you can't do if you're going to rely only on using stores where you can get your sensor cleaned or manufacturers' services that they sometimes offer. If you found this useful, please remember to drop a like and a subscribe in the various blocks around the YouTube screen. Your support goes a long way in allowing me to continue this particular channel because, of course, it is self-funded. And in no way, shape or form have I been supported by any of the manufacturers of the cleaning materials that I have in front of me, apart from perhaps the fact that I am a local Nisi ambassador. So I did kind of get this one as a freebie. But that doesn't mean I don't recommend it. I still think this is one of the best blowers I've ever come across. And if I didn't, I wouldn't be using this. I'd be using one of the other ones. Thanks very much for watching. And if you made it this far, I hope to see you again on the next one. Cheers.